It's a day ending in Y, which means it's a day where Adam Silver shows himself to be a completely weak, insipid person. Now, you're probably asking, what does Adam Silver have to do with this? And what am I even talking about? Well, if you clicked on the video, then you know what I'm talking about here. Stephen A. Smith, on his rag of a show, First Take, I guess still a lot of people actually watch the show live every day. I have not tuned in for an episode of First Take in many, 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 many years, but a lot of people still do. I don't know, maybe barbershops or like, I don't know, Planet Fitnesses keep these things on. I don't know. But either way, let's take this back to, I think, Jaylen Brown. And I think Jaylen Brown, he's been on a big, I don't want to say bender, but he's been, streaming on Twitch a lot since the Celtics got eliminated from the playoffs. And I believe a day ago, yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, I'm not sure when this was streamed, he called out Stephen A. Smith. Um, Jaylen Brown basically called Stephen A. Smith to retire from his job because he has no integrity. Here are the exact quotes from Jaylen Brown. Tell this MF to retire because he is the face of clickbait media. Maybe with his retirement, we can spark a movement to have some type of integrity in order to hold themselves accountable. So Jaylen Brown, not a big fan of Stephen A. Smith, but I feel like that's kind of a typical criticism you'll see from a player directed towards a media personality like Stephen A. Smith, right? Like it's very common for players not to like pundits or journalists or anything like that. That's very normal. Honestly, that's kind of pretty tame for what Jaylen Brown said about Stephen A. Smith. I don't think there's anything off the walls or bonkers about that. He ain't like speaking crazy or anything like that. Just kind of let's just say I don't think Jaylen Brown tunes into First Take. I don't think he's a big fan of Stephen A. Smith. But then Stephen A. Smith, today on First Take, apparently, basically warned Jaylen Brown, claiming he knows things about him that would hurt his feelings. And this is what Stephen A. Smith had to say. Jaylen Brown, be careful what you wish for. You really want me to start reporting on that level? You understand? Locker room, how the organization might think about you, how the city may feel about you, how Jason Tatum may or not feel about you, sneaker deals, endorsement deals, the list goes on and on. The season's over, bro. You're on Twitch trying to do what I do. Which, okay. I'm not sure. It's like, there's the thing. If Jaylen Brown wanted to show up on ESPN and be on their airwaves, I guarantee you ESPN would probably absolutely jump to have one of the, 15 best players in the league on their television. If Jaylen Brown wants to do that, he absolutely can. But my issue with these comments, it's not even the Twitch thing. I don't really care about that. It's just kind of almost like threatening, right? And I guess, and I've seen other people say this, and it's almost like Stephen A. Smith thinks he's some sort of like mob boss or something. He thinks he's like Tony Soprano, or he thinks he's John Gotti. Basically, threatening Jaylen Brown's like, hey, you know what? If you don't talk about me the way I like, I'm going to report stuff about you that, I just, something about that to me is just really, again, I think it kind of proves Jaylen Brown's point here is that this guy is basically just clickbait, bullshit media, nothing but nonsense, nothing but drama, things that aren't really important to be reported. I guess here's the thing that you have to realize about athletes. There's probably all sorts of stuff that could be reported on about these guys that people don't report on. Why? Because it has really nothing to do with basketball or football or in any sport. And it's not like breaking the law or anything like that. Like, there's a difference, right? I think when you come to like sports reporting, right? And I think we've seen this kind of decay over the past 10, 15 years, at least from when I was a teenager, right? So closer to like 15 years. We have seen, I feel like before things got kept, the criticism of these players, what was talked about of these players, I felt like a lot of this stuff got kept on the court, on the field, on the rink, whatever you want to call it, right? Whatever sport it is, things got kept on field, how the players performed, things like that. Would people say off the wall stuff? Sure, but it would always be off the wall stuff about how the player would perform. It'd be about their performance, them as players. Not this. Not Stephen A. Smith talking about, the locker room or how the city may feel about you, or Jason Tatum may feel about you, or sneaker deals and endorsement. Like this almost verges on, like, to me, like a threat of like basically trying to tamper with the locker room, basically, right? It's basically almost like trying to like Stephen A. Smith being saying, "Hey, I can drive a wedge between you and Jason Tatum, and I could blow that whole team up if I wanted to." And you probably wonder, well, what is? You probably think back now when I mentioned Adam Silver at the start of this video. Well, what does Adam Silver have to do with this? The fact that Stephen A. Smith said these things, reported on, or not reported, but basically implied all of these things that he can do to Jason Tatum and the Celtics. And the fact that there was no, I would say, if look, I've watched these shows for you. I don't watch them anymore, but I remember sometimes someone would say something off the wall, and then they'd cut to like a headshot of them, kind of like this, basically like, hey, you know what? I just, I want to apologize to whoever for these comments. I want to apologize to my colleagues and the network here at ESPN. My comments were in poor taste or whatever. When's the last time Stephen A. Smith ever did that? The fact that there was not an immediate call from the NBA league office to ESPN to basically be like, hey, what the fuck is this? Please do not have one of your reporters, pundits, journalists, whatever you want to call it, entertainers. I believe that's the best way to call it. He's more of an entertainer than a journalist now these days. Please do not have him on air threaten one of our players. Please don't have him on the air threatening basically one of our premier franchises with nonsense like this. This is not what this airtime should be used for. Again, the Eastern Conference Finals are about to start. Knicks, Cavaliers, right? Some star players, some big time players. James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Karl-Anthony Towns, Jaylen Brown. I'm sure they talked about it, but that should be like the main point of conversation. Jaylen Brown's Twitch comments, probably that should be like a little blurb on anything on to do with ESPN airwaves. Instead, it leads to, Stephen A. Smith trying to act like as if he's a mob boss, as if he holds more power in the league than players or teams or anything. Like Stephen A. Smith seems to genuinely believe he does hold that much sway. And for me, again, why I mentioned Adam Silver, there needed to be a call. There needed to be a call to ESPN saying, hey, you know what? That cannot happen. And basically make it clear, if he does not go on the air and apologize and basically, redact what he just said, we'll make it very clear, he will not be allowed in the building for anything that the Knicks do in this potential NBA Finals run that they might go on here, right? I mean, there has to be a point here where the league, kind of just reestablishes the relationship here. Because in my opinion, I'm someone who has always felt that I feel like the NBA kind of just lets ESPN kind of walk all over them, walk all over their league. I've mentioned this before in the Giannis video, where I just feel like this is a network that is basically allowed to trash smaller market teams. They're basically allowed to trash smaller market cities. I think Stephen A. Smith is a key example of someone who has done that before. And the league doesn't ever really feel like they're out there to protect their players. It doesn't feel like the league is out there to protect its teams. It doesn't feel like it's out there to protect the fans in these cities. And it just feels odd to me. You don't see this with how the NFL is covered. You don't see this with how Major League Baseball is covered. Granted, they don't really talk too much baseball or hockey on shows like First Take. At least they didn't when I watched. I feel like you saw a little bit of baseball still. I remember baseball used to be a big part of conversation really on First Take, kind of before it was I remember before First Take was First Take. I used to be called like Cold Pizza or something like that. I might be wrong. They would talk baseball, and I think it was held by like Jay Crawford, I believe. Dana Jacobs, I think might have been like the old host on those shows. But either way, the league needs to kind of just, I think, reestablish kind of who's more important in this relationship, because right now it feels like ESPN is more important in this relationship, and really that's not the case. You're a broadcast partner, you are important, but who holds the power, who holds the cards in this relationship should be the league. It should be the NBA. Okay? And I feel like at some point someone from the NBA needs to just clear the air with ESPN and the network. And I'm not saying that they need to, directly kind of how do I say this without it sounding like censorship? I don't think we want censorship, but there does need to be kind of an understanding like, hey, look, you can't just go after our players like this for like your personal petty beefs. That is not what this is. If Stephen A. Smith wants to go and say this nonsense on his own platforms, fine, cool. He wants to start his own podcast like he does and he says this stuff, fine, cool. But you will not do that while using our footage, using our stuff on your airwaves. That's just not going to happen. Cannot happen. That cannot be a thing. It continues to be a thing. The only other example I have of this happening really recently, like the past year, I mean, Stephen A. I think if he's done this with like Kevin Durant, and there might be a couple other players where he's done this with too. Like this isn't like his first rodeo doing this. And the reaction each time, I feel like gets a little worse. I think most people are like, yo, what is this? Like, why is this guy trying to act like he's Tony Soprano? Like I said before, like he's John Gotti, like he's the Godfather. Like stop. The only other example I have of this, I think, happening in the NFL, I believe it was kind of with ESPN's coverage of Aaron Rodgers last year. Um, there was, I believe it was Dan Graziano was going on in this big rant how Aaron Rodgers was like one of the worst people to ever be in the NFL. And I was like, dude, there's been like murderers and rapists in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers didn't take some stupid vaccine. This isn't me saying you should or shouldn't take the vaccine. You know what I'm talking? I don't care. Also, that's not an American flag. That's a pro wrestling flag for MJF, Big Hebrew. Get your belt back from that liar Darby Allin. No. But there was something kind of like that with Aaron Rodgers, where it felt like their coverage became very personal, right? It strayed outside of what he was doing on the football field and became more personal attacks, personal things like that. And again, there was this rant by Dan Graziano where I felt like after that, you didn't really see that. I think Dan Graziano then was kind of off TV for a little bit. To me, so I'm like, maybe I look too much into this stuff. To me, that very much screams someone from the NFL made a call and said, yo, what's that? Like that's not about football. That's something else personal. Do not have that on the airways where you're using our footage, where you're using our league's intellectual property. Do not do that again. And again, the ESPN, they're not bigger than the NFL, right? They know how that relationship structures. What the NFL wants, they'll get. And that's just more than money. That's about coverage, access, all these other things. There's a lot of levers when you're a league like the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NFL, whatever, that you can offer your broadcast partners or you can take away from your broadcast partners. Adam Silver doesn't pull those levers. I feel like other leagues look out for their players better than Adam Silver does. And it's very strange. Like, it's strange in that regard where I feel like Adam Silver kind of lets the players, maybe this is like I don't know, maybe it's so weird with him. Like he kind of lets the players do whatever they want at times. And yet he also doesn't necessarily protect the players. When you have a guy like Stephen A. Smith, I think going after players like this, talking about, there's stuff out there that, I haven't reported that I could report that can make your life really miserable. I think he's done this with like LeBron. He's done this with KD. He's done this with Jaylen Brown now. There might be some other players that I'm missing. Notice Stephen A. doesn't really try this with football players ever. Maybe he's more afraid a football player might come and whoop his ass or something. He knows NBA players aren't like about that life. NFL players, probably a little different, wired a little differently. So maybe that's what the feeling is. It's a very weird dynamic with the NBA. And I feel like these are dynamics that need to get, I think, kind of rebalanced, I think, right? We need to get this stuff back in line, right? I think, again, no one should be bigger than the league itself. Very rarely should a player ever be bigger than, the team. And then really the media reporting should not be on the level of the players, right? Like Stephen A. Smith is a star, right? But Stephen A. Smith feels he's bigger to the league than the players. That is not the case. That cannot be the case. And that should never be the case. Ever, whatsoever. That sort of idea should not and cannot be allowed to, I think, exist. Not in Stephen A's head. There just needs to be a time where, and I think time's right now, where I think this relationship needs to just be, again, the balance of everything just needs to be reset here. And I just don't think Adam Silver is the guy to do that, because I think Adam Silver, I think he sees this on Twitter. Of course, my phone's going to go off. We're going to take a quick look here. So the person who tweeted this out, Big Business Ahmed, this thing has almost like 1 million views. He tweeted out the Jaylen Brown clip, almost 800,000 views. And who knows how many views that has like on YouTube. I could go look this up right now. Again, sorry, this is all live. We're doing this live, people, where I do this, but I don't have a team of people behind me. It's just me. We'll see here. Like, did this clip make it to ESPN? And it did. It's on ESPN's. It's on their website. Again, I think at some point, I think this needs to be nipped in the bud. I think at some point, again, I'll keep saying it. The league needs to kind of take a belt to, I think, to ESPN and kind of, really, I think Stephen A. Smith should be kind of sidelined a little bit here for the rest of these playoffs. I do not understand this. You know what I mean? And it's just, it's so weird. And again, is Stephen A. Smith in here talking about how he's not going to disrespect Jaylen Brown, and then he immediately disrespects him. I don't get this. I really don't. Again, I feel like this is a situation where the league has to step in and tell a media partner, check your boy. And I feel like the league doesn't do that enough. The NBA doesn't do that enough, because I think Adam Silver, in his head, well, this is getting views on social media. People are tweeting about it. That's good, right? I think he has that mindset that I think a lot of guys his age do in the business world now, where I think they don't understand social media views in a way where I think they get a little overly impressed with these numbers. And it's just like, look, a lot of these numbers are bullshit. A lot of them are based on bots and things like that. A view that you get on TV isn't the same as getting a view on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. Like, it's not the same thing. And I think Adam Silver views it as the same thing. And, who probably thinks, well, look, all our players have all these Instagram followers, and isn't this like so cool? And it's like, man, like, that stuff doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't mean anything, but I think in context of the league, it kind of means nothing. And, I'm going to finish with this. I think Adam Silver, at times he wants to be viewed as like the cool substitute teacher, but I think at times he can't tell when at the same time, while trying to be viewed as cool by, I think, some of the players. I think I've made this argument before. I think at times he does want to be viewed as that. I also think another time he also doesn't seem to protect the players from other forces. And again, I think this force kind of is Stephen A. Smith in this regard. And I just think at some point, you have to, if that upsets Stephen A. Smith, then it upsets Stephen A. Smith. But you have to kind of establish, hey, we're the top dog here in this relationship. You're not going to disrespect our players. You're not going to craft narratives about our players that are frankly probably not even true, and also aren't things that need to be reported. I know that you don't need to report everything in a locker room. Right? Like, let a bench player write a book about that. That's not something that needs to be reported. You don't need to slander players. You don't need to threaten players, which basically feels like Stephen is doing here, threatening a player into silence. That's not something that needs to be done. It's very strange that this keeps happening, and there's like no response by the league. We'll see. Maybe Jaylen Brown's going to be different. Maybe Jaylen Brown has decided, you know what, screw this guy. I'm going to keep going at him. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there'll be a Twitch stream later tonight by Jaylen Brown where he kind of keeps going at Stephen A. Smith. I kind of hope he does. Like, I kind of want to see where this goes personally. It's not great for the league. It's not great for the league at all to have your players in pissing matches on social media with an entertainer from ESPN. That's not great. I know that might sound, that's not a good thing. That's not what you want your players to be viewed as doing, getting into petty squabbles with, a guy like Stephen A. Smith who dresses like a maitre d' at a Golden Corral. That's not what you want. So I'm gonna get out of here. If you like me rambling about this stuff, let me know. I appreciate it. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. I'll probably have more to talk about. I can always find something to talk about that annoys me in sports. So, yeah.